talk to you about a problem that literally millions of students around the world face every single day when learning English. And this is honestly a problem that you probably face too. Maybe you feel nervous to speak English. Maybe you feel shy, you feel embarrassed, you feel like people are judging you when you open your mouth. And this is a huge problem because it's preventing you from speaking. It's preventing you from expressing your thoughts and sharing your ideas with the world in the way that you want to. You're not alone. This is something I deal with all the time. Every single day, in classes, in our programs, with students, people tell me all the time that they feel nervous to speak English. They feel nervous when speaking their second language, or in some cases, English is their third, fourth, even fifth language. Now, I want to address this topic in today's video and give you some advice on how to fix this problem and how to start speaking confidently. So first up, you have to recognize that this is not an English problem. It's not even a second language problem or third language problem. Because if you're like most people, or according to psychology today, 3 out of 4 people, that's about 75% of people, you might have a fear of public speaking. And this statistic refers to public speaking in your native language. Getting up in front of people, giving a presentation, giving a speech, giving a talk. It's something that makes a lot of people nervous. Maybe it makes you sweat, it gives you butterflies in your stomach. It's very common to feel nervous before giving any sort of public presentation or public speech. And this is something called glossophobia. Maybe you've heard that word before, glossophobia. Now, glossophobia gets even worse in your second language or your third language. And it's not just speaking in front of a large crowd or a large audience or a large group of people. You feel nervous speaking in front of a small group of people, even in front of one person, maybe your friend or your boss or a stranger if you have to ask them for directions or advice in public. And the reason you feel nervous in these situations in your second language and probably not in your first language is simply because you are more familiar with your native language. You have more familiarity. And if you think about it this way, the solution to this problem is quite simple. You simply have to become more familiar with English. You need more practice. And it probably sounds stupidly obvious. I mean, you probably know this, but if you think about it, you create a negative loop. Because every time you're in a conversation or you want to get into a conversation and you don't speak, you're reinforcing that bad behavior. You're telling your body, or you're telling your brain rather, that it's okay not to speak because you feel nervous. So you're reinforcing that behavior, and all that does is create a negative cycle. You get into a conversation, you don't speak. If you don't speak, you don't practice. If you don't practice, you never improve. So the key to feeling more confident and to feeling more comfortable to express your ideas in a second language is just to overcome that initial barrier and to start speaking. It's like walking into a cold shower, right? At first, it's not pleasant to walk into a cold shower, but your body adjusts to the temperature, you get used to it. So if you can overcome that initial barrier, with time, you'll start to feel more confident. It will get better, I promise. Now, there's actually a psychological element to this. Now, when you get into a situation where your brain feels nervous, it's because you're activating what's called your amygdala. Now, the amygdala is the part of your brain which is responsible for fear. We haven't actually changed that much physically or mentally since the days of our ancestors when we were in the savannah being attacked by a lion. But nowadays, instead of being scared by the lion, we're scared by certain social situations. And we develop this fight or flight response, which is an instinctive response to the situation. It makes you scared, and it makes you not want to participate. It makes you want to escape, to flee. But as I've showed you, the key to overcoming this problem is to ignore that. Ignore that instinctive fight or flight response. It's difficult, but it can be done. And you just have to acknowledge that's what's happening when you get into that situation and try to override it, try to overcome that. Look, I'm going to be honest with you, you're not bad at English. You just have a familiarity problem. And if you can make yourself more comfortable getting into conversations, doing things that right now you find uncomfortable, then eventually you will feel a lot more comfortable. It just takes practice. Obviously, I can tell you that. I can spend hours talking to you about that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really help you unless you actually go out and take action. Now, I want to conduct a little thought experiment with you. Think for a moment. Why are you learning English? I don't mean for work or for the IELTS or for immigration. I mean, why are you learning a second language? Think about this question on a more fundamental level. You're learning a second language to communicate with people. And guess what? You can still communicate with people even if you make mistakes, even if your language isn't perfect. I'll show you what I mean. Look at this sentence here on the screen. Can you understand it? Obviously, it's entirely incorrect. The spelling is completely wrong. There are a lot of typos here, but you can probably understand the meaning of this sentence. If you never speak, you will never become fluent. So even though the letters are in the wrong order, you still understand the sentence. Now, this is something called typoglycemia. And typoglycemia is basically your brain's ability to recognize patterns. And I bring this to your attention because once you realize that your brain recognizes patterns and it doesn't actually focus on these small letters or these little tiny things, you'll realize that most people don't actually notice mistakes. So if you're in a conversation with somebody, with a native speaker, for example, and you make a mistake, chances are they probably don't even notice it. Now, I know this might be a controversial opinion, especially amongst other teachers who teach English, but honestly, when you're in a conversation with somebody, just let go. Forget about the grammar. Don't focus on the grammar. It doesn't matter if you use the past simple instead of the present perfect. It doesn't matter if you use the second conditional instead of the third conditional. It literally doesn't matter when you're in conversation. 99.9% of the time, you can still get your message across. You can still express your ideas. And whoever you're speaking with will still understand you, even if you make mistakes. And again, there's a good chance they won't even notice your mistakes. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't focus on grammar, that you shouldn't focus on correct pronunciation, because yes, of course you should. You should aim to speak English as correctly as possible, as clearly as possible, and as accurately as possible. Obviously, native speakers do make mistakes as well. Mistakes are part of life, but you should focus on that when you're in a situation where you can practice. And by practice, I mean class or on your own, sitting down at a desk and studying. Maybe you like soccer or football, as they say in the UK. Do you think that Ronaldo, in the middle of the game, is thinking about how high he should lift his leg to kick the ball, what angle he should curve his knee? No, of course not. He's not thinking of any of that. He's just focusing on the game. He's in the moment. He's practiced all that in training. Obviously, there's a technique. I don't play soccer anymore myself, but there is correct technique when you play any sort of sport, when you play any instrument, when you learn grammar, you learn how to pronounce words. Obviously, there is correct technique. There is a correct way of doing that, but you learn that on the practice ground. You don't learn that in the game. And you can think of conversation like a game. Every time you go into a conversation, your goal should just be to let the words flow out of your mouth. Don't think about what you learned in practice. Don't think about what you learned with your coach or with your teacher. Just go with the flow. Let the words flow and slip out of your mouth. Stay in the moment. Stay focused on what actually matters. And then after the conversation, you can go back and you can analyze what went wrong. What did you do well? How can you improve this? What things didn't you understand? But in the conversation itself, your priority should just be to speak, to communicate, to go with the flow. All right, I'm going to give you one last strategy that I really like to give my students. And that's something called the 3-second rule. So when you are in a conversation with somebody and you don't know what to say, you're constantly searching for the right word. As I said before, the solution is just to let go. Don't focus on it. And instead, tell yourself that you have 3 seconds to say something. It can be anything, but you have 3 seconds to answer. If you know you have 3 seconds, this kind of forces you to find something in those 3 seconds. You don't have all day to look for the perfect word, to search for the perfect conjugation. You have 3 seconds to open your mouth and to say something. That's the 3-second rule. It's almost like a game, but it's super powerful because you are forcing your brain to respond quickly in real time in conversation. Now, obviously, if you're answering something that requires a more thoughtful response, don't use that rule. I don't want you to say anything you regret, but in most situations, I would say 98% of situations, this is a very good rule to follow. Give yourself 3 seconds and say whatever comes to mind in those 3 seconds. This forces you to break that cycle that I mentioned earlier, where you stop speaking, and that obviously prevents you from improving, because if you have 3 seconds, you force yourself to speak. You force yourself to open your mouth and to overcome that negative cycle. I hope you found this video useful. Again, the big takeaway from this video should be that you need to speak. You need to force yourself to overcome that negative feedback loop. And of course, don't take things as seriously. And honestly, when you're in a conversation with somebody, let things go. Don't focus on the grammar. Don't focus on the pronunciation. Don't focus on all those little details that don't belong in the conversation. They belong in training, in the practice match, in the lesson, at your desk, in your room, not in the conversation. And if you make that one small change, I promise you, you will start speaking more confidently. You will feel more empowered to speak, and eventually you will become fluent. Hope you found this video useful. If you would like to study English with me, click the link in the description below. We have several programs that I know will help you, but they are by application only. So if you would like to apply, click the link in the description below. Subscribe to English at the Ready here on YouTube. Leave a like. Let me know in the comments. Do you find it nerve-wracking to speak English? Do you feel nervous? Do you feel shy? Let me know in the comments.